What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over implementing an in-game store. So this is part one. Like the character and stage select, we're going to have multiple parts to this, so this is just the initial setup. In fact, we can't do much of anything at the moment with it. I won't have control using my keyboard or my controller in the menu, nor with my mouse. But we are going to start auto-populating the data that we see in here. So once we enter the store, these items that you see are actually items that reside within our character section of the data table that stores all of our in-game store items. So the reason you're seeing the mannequin and the mutant right now is because they fall under the section that we have currently loaded. So this is actually data that we're pulling from a data table. So this page is dynamic, and the data is being used to populate what we're seeing on this page, right? So these characters, these icons are only showing up because we have told them to. We are going to be able to add items to our data table for what we want in our in-game store, and the icons, the name, and the description should populate in here. Again, this is all defaults for today, but this is just part one. We're getting the store set up, we're getting the items populating. In episode 2, we'll go over controlling it and changing the details depending on the selection we're on. It is quite literally that simple right now, so let's just hop right into it. Before we get started on this episode, if you want to get caught up to anything that we have done in the series, I will link you the entire playlist right here in the top right corner. You can check out everything that we've done to get to this point. If you just are interested in the in-game store, no worries, you don't have to follow the entire series to learn that, although I will link this episode of data tables here if you want to get familiar with how to use them. Not only does that episode go over the basics, but you can also start to learn how to prepare and plan these structures out for your data table so you know what kind of information to put inside of them. To get started today, I'm going to make 2 widgets, so let's go into our blueprints where we want our widgets to be, and I have a menus folder, so I'm going to go in there and I'm going to make the store widget and then the store item icon. To do this, you can go to add new, user interface, widget blueprint. When you do this, it'll just make one and you can just name it. It's very simple. We've done this many times throughout the series, but if that's your first one, it honestly doesn't get much easier than that. I'm going to start with my store widget, so we'll go into this one. And this is my actual interface for my store. So this is my in-game store. You can make yours look a lot nicer, of course. This is just what I have as a default base. As usual with the widgets, I will go over everything I've added so you can see my exact process, but feel free to change this up, especially if you're more familiar with widgets. There's a lot of ways you could organize this or categorize these things. There are a ton of ways to handle widgets, and you can pretty much accomplish them in an infinite number of ways, so feel free to do with this as you like. For me, what I've done is I've included an image that I just brought onto the screen, and I anchored it using the full screen anchor here. Made sure all the offsets were 0, and that is my background. So right now I just changed the color and opacity to make sure that it was black, but you could also put an actual image here, or you could put a camera that links you to some part of the scene so you can actually see part of a level or maybe a blacksmith or something like that. Okay, that's the background image. Then I have a simple text box that says store. You can look at my stuff, but it's anchored to the top middle. Here are my exact positions. Feel free to slow this down at any point and select them, but really this is all just for visuals. Now the first really important one here is this vertical box. It's not required that you put this in a vertical box, but this is where I'm putting all of my categories. And if we put them in a vertical box, then we will be able to automatically resize it as we add things to it, so we can add more categories in the future very easily. So I would recommend putting it in some sort of container. For me, what I did was search for vertical box, drag it onto the screen. And at this point, I want to have buttons with text in them for each possible option. These are going to be our selections. When we do get control over this menu using keyboard and controller, we're going to make sure that we can scroll through these and select them to then populate different results based on the category we're on. So you can position the vertical box wherever you'd like. These are my values, but again, this is completely just for the visuals, just how I want it to look on screen. You can change that, don't worry about it. You can add things to the vertical box by simply dragging a widget into it and just kind of hovering over it and releasing the mouse button. So for me, what I've done is I really just dragged one button into it and then copied it. but you could drag as many elements as you want into this vertical box. So I added a button, and I called it my character's button. Here are my settings for the button. Then I added text into that button as a child of the button. Now you can't have multiple children on a button, so I only have that one. But if you don't have anything here, it will let you do that. And then here I have my character's button text, or CB text. Change the text to characters, as well as my font settings. And that's really all there is to the text. It's just to kind of label this button for us. Nothing super important. Then I copied it 4 times, or really pasted it 3 times. So I have stages, outfit/skins, and game settings. So all of these are our categories. They're all within the vertical box. I just renamed the buttons and then changed the text as well. This is going to be more useful when we have control over this menu with our keyboard or mouse. So for now, this is good enough. What we're going to be populating today is another vertical box as well as a horizontal box. So I'm going to mix these 2 boxes together. So I have another vertical box that I brought onto the screen, and I've called it my item vertical box. Here are my settings for that. I have made the item vertical box a variable. Inside of the vertical box, I've added a horizontal box. That can be found the same way as the vertical box, just simply typing horizontal and dragging it as a child of the item vertical box. And I've called this the item horizontal box. This one we're definitely going to want as a variable. Vertical box means that we can fill up this box with elements from top to bottom, just like we did here. We're going to fill it up from top to bottom with a horizontal box, so we can also put items horizontally in here, so they can go like rows and columns. So make sure your item vertical box is a variable. Then inside of there we have a horizontal box. This item horizontal box is also a variable because we need to grab that to add children to it. So we're going to want that to be a variable. For my horizontal and vertical alignment, it looks like this. This is actually the default, so it's not a problem. You don't have to manually go and set it. But I would recommend this because we want the horizontal box to span the entire width of the vertical box. The height will be determined based on how many elements we have in the vertical box and some settings on there. So you don't have to worry too much about the vertical alignment, but the default is fine for now. And here are my settings for the horizontal box. Lastly, I've added 2 more things. I've added a name text and a description text, which aren't bound to anything right now. So basically, I've just added 2 text widgets. One called name text, one called description text. And just kind of defaulted name of item and description of item, so we can begin to imagine how this is going to look and fit together. As always, I'll go ahead and show you all my actual properties of each of these, just in case you want to copy this exactly like I have it. But since most of them are default, I'm just scrolling through them fast. You can always slow down the video or pause it if you want to look at something specific and compare. With all of that out of the way, we can now make the store item icon widget as well. So if we go and make a new user interface widget blueprint, I call this one store item icon. This one is really simple. I have my basic canvas panel here, and I've just added a button onto it that I called the icon button. And we can replace the image of this button with whatever we want. So this will be the actual item that we're going to be selecting, such as our character, our stage, our in-game cosmetics, whatever it is that we can unlock within our store. In my example is the mutant and the mannequin here. Now, when I hover the mouse over them, I haven't set up the mouse effects, so they just default to the default button image, which is why you're seeing this right here. In my example of the store here, the mutant and the mannequin are both store item icon widgets that we've added to the horizontal box. So once you've added this button in here to your canvas panel, or if you're in UE5, you won't have a canvas panel by default, that's actually okay. You can just use an icon button. Or if you'd like to follow this, you can go ahead and add your own canvas. You can search for canvas and just add it to the start of the widget, and then add a button to it. However you're doing it doesn't matter. But The size of this button is going to matter, so make sure the size of the button matches what you want in the store, in the shop, like this. This button is actually going to use the size that we give it to determine how much space it's going to take up within the horizontal box, so it is important that we do make it the appropriate size. You can change the size of the button here using the size X and the size Y, so it doesn't really matter. If you get it wrong, you can just always change this. It's super simple. Nothing else has to change on the button. If we go into the graph of the store item icon, I have nothing in the event graph, but I do have one function that we can call, and I called it set item details, and this is just going to set the style of the button. You could technically bind the style of the button if you want, but I wanted to call set item details and have a function so that if we ever want to refresh the shop or change things manually via function call, we can do so. So to make this happen, just make a new function, press plus function here, and I called it set item details. I added a new input parameter by pressing this button here and made it a texture 2D, which I've called icon image. Essentially, we are going to pull the texture 2D from the data table, and we're going to set the button to have a normal image of this texture. So essentially we're replacing the image that this button has, which right now is just this color, this basic button color, with the image from the data table. So like our mannequin or mutant profile picture like you saw in my actual shop or store menu. To do this, it's really simple. Here's our function. We have our icon image variable on it. We can get our icon button in the graph. To do so, make sure that your icon button is a variable. Once you see it here, you can just get it, drag off of it, set style. I want to select the one under variables, appearance set style. Technically, the other one can work as well, but this one is easier and actually has less stuff, and we're not going to need all the extra stuff that the other one has. So I'm going to split the struct bin by right-clicking on the style and selecting split struct bin, and I'm going to do it again for the widget style normal. When I do that, I'll get this, which is what you've seen over here on the left side. Now from here, it's very simple. We're going to pass the icon image into the widget style normal image. Whatever textured 2D this function gets passed in, we'll pass it to this set style, and this image will be updated. Additionally, the style size here should either be an arbitrary value like we have here, or even better actually, we can get the desired size of it and pass it in. So let's delete these nodes here, and now let's bring this over, get desired size, and pass this in. Now if we are to play the game, you'll see that the shop still works with the correct size. But if we change the size of the button, say and make this 20x 240y, you'll see that they also change size. So I'm going to switch it back to 240 because I like that size. However, using the get desired size will allow us to change the size of the widget, and this will still work without having to change this function. Now this is a little bit ugly, so I'm going to move this over now, and we'll have something like that. It's still pretty ugly, but gets the job done. Now we're done with the store item icon widget. We're going to use it and add it to the horizontal box, but we don't have to do anything else inside of it. So now let's go to our store widget. At this point, we probably want to add the store or shop widget to the main menu and add a button so that we can actually access it, because this next part is where we're going to test adding things to the horizontal box here. And to do that, we need to actually get to this screen. So I'm going to go to my main menu screen widget. I explained this a few episodes back, but I have changed around my main menu a little bit. Really, it's just cosmetic, so I moved the main menu to the middle of the screen by anchoring it in the middle and changing the offsets. That's not required, but I did so that I could make more room in here, and thus I can fit everything that we have. Now I've added a shop button, but since I've called it store everywhere else, I am going to actually rename this to the store button text. Store button, and name the actual text on the button store. That way we're consistent throughout. Now, in the main menu, I have a canvas panel with a bunch of buttons in here. All I've done is really copied one of these other ones since it already has the style and the setup, and I've just called it store button. Here are my settings, as usual. You can take a look at them. The button has text on it, which I've called store button text. And you can see all my variables and all my properties on here. And it's that simple. I mean, I changed the positions around so that it fits in here and they all fit on the screen. But again, this is all visual. So now, if you want to see my positions, I'll go ahead and click on them. There you go. With the main menu updated, we do have to update the logic as well, because now that has changed quite a bit. So let's go to our event graph, and since I'm inserting store before credits, we also have to make some adjustments to what buttons, what indices correspond to what actions. So let's start in the event graph. Let's start out by adjusting our variables. So we have a max selections variable, which was 7 before because it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Of course, I've added the store button now, so we need to make sure that the max selections is 8. So change the default value on that. Next one we need to go to is the move selection border function. We don't have to do anything in move selection because it works for all cases. Move selection border hasn't been cleaned up, as some of our widgets have, to work for any image or any style. And so it's a little bit more manual than some of our other widgets. But it's okay, it'll still work the same. Essentially, we need to add a new condition in here. Since our number of max selections changed, we could have another selection in here on this switch statement. So I've just added an additional pin. And remember, this starts at index 0. So index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, index 4, index 5, index 6, index 7. So credits was previously index 5, but now it is store. Credits is now index 6, quit is index 7. So we need to make sure 5, 6, and 7 are accurate. So make sure to add a pin here so that you have 7 elements here, or however many you need if you're not following the series directly. 5 is this one, and it should lead to my store icon. So after following this along, we get here. And you can copy the other ones if you'd like, if you're still using this method and you haven't updated it like me. You can copy your other ones and paste it and just change the button being passed in. Otherwise, it's super simple. Make sure your store button is a variable. Once it is, you can do the same thing that we did in our store item icon widget. We can get the store, we can set the style. Using the variables appearance, we can split the struct pin and then split the struct pin again to get this node you see here. At this point, we want to select our hover variation of the button, which is when it's blue. So this is when I'm actually selecting the option on the main menu. And then we want to clear past selections, which gets rid of the other selections we have and basically puts them back to the default gray value. Now index 6 and 7 in this function should now be credits and quit. So they've just essentially moved over one index. All right. Next one we have to go to is clear past selections. So clear past selections is also not using the updated method that we've used for some of the newer widgets. You can go through and completely change it. Or alternatively, you can just add this index, which is what I've done here. So I have clear selection 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7 was all that we had prior. Again, now we have 8, so of course we have to add new logic. You can copy this logic and paste it and it will work, but just remember what's going on here. We're checking to make sure that the player isn't currently selected on this button, and then if they're not, we're just going to set it back to the default style of the button. So of course we need to make sure that we have one for all of our indices now. Copy this and paste it. And just make sure you change the index, although you won't have a clear selection 8 yet. So to do that, again, if you're using this antiquated method, you can go back to your event graph and go to where you have all your clear selections. We need to add a custom event and make a clear selection 8. Then we have to make sure that our indices line up. So previously, clear selection 6 was the credits button and clear selection 7 was the quit button. Of course, I've moved the credits and the quit button to clear selection 7 and clear selection 8. Clear selection 6 will now be the store button. This part is super simple. This is the same way where we're setting the style on each button, but now we're setting it back to button bearer 1. That is my default button color, my gray button, my unselected button. Now once you've done that, the last thing we need to do is the confirm selection logic. So let's go into there. And in confirm selection, this is when we've actually said, yes, we want to go into this option on this menu. We were going into a switch statement, which of course only had 0 through 6 for 7 indices. Remember that index 5 on this menu is now the store widget. So we're going to make sure that we need to override 5 from being the credits to now be the store. So we're going to add a new pin on this switch, and 6 is going to be credits, 7 is going to be quit, and they have not changed in their logic. We just want to change where they're coming from. 5 is now going into our store widget. So this one is important because this is entirely new, but it's also very easy. We are literally going to just call create widget. We're going to select our new store widget. Then we can drag off of the store widget and click add to viewport. This will get it showing up on the screen. At this point, we're going to remove our main menu screen widget from the game. We could also just stop listening if you'd like we've done in some of the other sections. That is up to you. But removing from parent is also safe here. It's not a problem either way. In which case, after doing all of this, we will be able to go into our main menu, go to our store. All of our buttons should still work properly. So quit should still work, credit should still work, and store should now work. Now that we can get into the store, we need to set up what should happen when we're in the store. So let's go back into our store widget and let's go into our graph. Now, this time I'm doing everything in the event graph, and what I'm going to need to do is have our data table ready. Let's set that up now. This data table is actually going to be my unlockable item data table. You could have a store item data table as well if you want. I'm going to have it as unlockables because we can use this data table for if we want to unlock things by doing certain actions, such as beating a certain part of the story or winning a certain number of matches, as well as just being able to buy things from the store. I'm going to make this structure in the code, so I'm going to go to my Visual Studio, and I'm going to go to my base game instance.h. Scrolling down below the other enums that I already have, and I'm making a new enum. So it's a unenum blueprint type, which we're going to need because we need to access this within the blueprint. I'm going to call it enum class unlockable item type, and it is going to be of type unsigned integer 8-bit. For the values of this enum, these are going to be the categories for what type of thing we're unlocking. So E-none is the default. It can either be used for miscellaneous items, or if for some reason something can't be unlocked at the time, you could pass the status. Then we're going to want to have character, stage, outfitter skin, and then game settings. You can have as many as you want. These are the ones I already had plans for, but feel free to add more or less, doesn't matter. Game settings would be something like infinite time if you didn't already have that. Now with this, you have all your unlockable types, and we're going to need to make a structure that we can use for the data table. So the next thing we need to do is make this structure here, F unlockable item. And of course this has to be blueprint type because we're going to use this for the data table so that people can fill out the elements of the shop, of the store. But to do this, we're going to need to make sure that the structure can be part of or made from the public ftable row base to make a data table out of it. We've done this before in this series for the character. But if we scroll up, to get the ftable row base, we need to make sure we have the include engine/datatable.h. So add this include to your base game instance.h, but make sure that you put it above the generated include. This base game instance.generated.h has to be the last include in the file. For all .h files, you'll see this is the case. So make sure you don't put the include below that or you will have issues. Now, inside this structure, I have generated body, which is Unreal's macro that they use for their structures. It just sets up some initial data that is needed. Remember, as always, that the macros don't use semicolons at the end of the lines, so we call it generated body, but there's no semicolon. Then I have 4 variables that I listed under public so that we can access them in the data table. These are the properties of the F unlockable item. So we have an F string name, an F string description, uTexture2D pointer, which is an image, and E unlockable item type, which is the enum that we just created up above, called type. All of these have the same U property, which is edit anywhere, blueprint read write, with a category of shop or store. Again, I have a little bit of a naming mismatch there. These should probably be store, but shop is fine too. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to go ahead and change them. Just so we don't get confused at any point. So we'll make them all store. Now, in this case, we actually don't have to have any sort of variable for this because this is more just a global existing thing. This is something where we can just make the data table and have it contain all the data. We don't have to keep track of each individual item. Now, for saving, we will want to know which ones we have, which ones we don't, but we're not there yet. So for now, we can just leave it like this. We don't need to make a variable. Once you've added this to your code, relaunch the engine or recompile. Go into where your other data tables are or wherever you want to put this, doesn't really matter. And I have an unlockable item data table. To do this, we just go add new miscellaneous data table. In here, we should be able to find our unlockable data structure that we made. So mine is called unlockable item. So I select that, and then I hit OK. Once I do that, it will make the data table for me. And actually, I already have one, so I'm going to delete this new one. I'm going to go into it. And here is my data table for my unlockable items. Now, because I don't have a ton of assets and a ton of additional stuff right now, I'm actually just using things that I already have unlocked. But of course, you'd want to have things in here that you haven't unlocked. So once you're in the data table, you can add new rows. I've added 6 rows by default, 2 characters, and 4 stages. But it is up to you how many you add. This could be as big or as small as you want. And so I'm going to add them all. I'd like to rename my rows by right-clicking on each row, renaming it, and give it the proper index. Technically, they already do have an index, so it's not required that you rename the row. But if you don't, it's just like new row _0, which I've always hated. So I like to rename it and just give it an index of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Also, by using these integers as our indices of the row, we can actually use it as an iterator for a for loop. We can know what index we're actually at, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, not really required, but just something that I like to think about. Now, for the other fields, it is entirely up to you what you want to do with this. For me, how I set it up was where I would see the name of the item would be here, description would be here. And so I gave them names that I think the user would find helpful. So I labeled it clearly based off of the category. Like, since this is a character type, not only is the type character, but also I put character : and then mannequin. So they know, the user knows they are buying the character and then the name of the character from the shop. For the description, I just put something fun like the mannequin joins the battle. The image is the actual icon I want the item to be in the store, so I just use the mannequin profile picture since I'm buying the mannequin character. Then again, the type is character. I've done the same for mutant. So character : mutant, the mutant stomps into action, use the mutant profile picture, and then put the type to be character. Also gone through and done the stages as well, so I have the training area, stage : training area, unlock the training area with the default training area icon with the type of stage. Then we have training area 2, which is unlock the awaited sequel to training area 2, using the training room icon image, and it's stage. Then we have stage Trail of the Wise, which is unlock the first stage created by a professional, Trail of the Wise. Thank you very much, Shadow Magnus, for this stage. It's amazing and I love it. We're using the Trail of the Wise icon here, and the type is stage. Lastly, we have another stage made by Shadow Magnus, which is the refinery stage. And I said unlock the hottest stage, refinery, using the refinery icon, and we have the stage type. Now the other ones I don't have anything for, but you could add your music, you could add outfits, you could have game settings, whatever you want. Basically, just fill out some elements in this data table. It doesn't have to be complete for now. Go back into the store widget and into the graph. Now we're going to fill out event construct of the store widget. So we can do get data table row names. And we're going to manually select our data table of unlockable item data. We know this is the only data table we're going to need to fill out for the store. So hard coding it here is perfectly fine. Then we want to drag out of the out row names and type for each loop. So essentially go through every row. The array element is actually a name. It's actually the row name. Remember the row name that I was renaming to be the index? 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4? That is what this array element returns. So now we can actually call get data table row, pass in the array element to the row name, and then select the data table as unlockable item data. Now we will get the data at that specific row, and we want to break it to get the name, description, image, and type. That is how I have these first 4 nodes set up. We can now get rid of this. Now, from here, what we want to take is the name, description, image, and type. The name and the description I'm not going to cover yet because that is going to be covered when we're able to select individual items. Right now we can't do that, so there's no reason to really set them, but we can populate the images, and we can do so based on the type. So specifically, since we can't navigate through the menus, I have my characters first. So I'm going to do a special check and just check if the type is equal to character. So if the row is found, basically meaning that a row name with the passed in row name is found, then we want to grab the data from it, and if the type is equal enum character, then we want to display it. That's how we're going to get our visuals for today. So drag this equal enum into a branch, and only if it's true do we want to display it. So we don't want to display our stages and stuff. If you do want to display your stages or display all your icons, you can simply just avoid this if check, and you'll see that all your icons show up in the horizontal box. But we're really not ready for that just yet. So I would recommend filtering out everything but your top category. Again, for me, that is characters. Assuming it is a character, then we just have to actually create the widget and then add it to the horizontal box. It's actually pretty simple. We need to create widget, and we need to go to store item icon as the class. Then we want to pull off of this and call set item details. That is that function that we made earlier in the episode for the store item icon. Set item details. And for it, we are going to pass in the image from the data table. See, image is going directly into that icon image. Once we do that, we want to add this element to the horizontal box. Eventually, once we reach the maximum number of elements in a horizontal box, we'll go down to the next row, a new horizontal box, which will be the next child in a vertical box. See, so if we have our horizontal boxes lined up, we can have rows and columns. But for now, again, we're not worried about that because we can't actually navigate them in any way, so I'm not even setting that up in this episode. All we need for now is our item horizontal box, so you can go ahead and grab your item HB, get it, drag off of it, type add child to horizontal box, and then you want to pass it the store item icon widget, so it has a return value when you create the widget. That's how we called set item details. Also taking that return value and plugging that into content. Now, assuming everything was done correctly, when this widget is constructed, it will grab all the characters from the data table and display them in the store. Anyway, guys, that's all I got for you today. In the next episode, we'll go over actually navigating through this and changing the data as we do. But this is a good start. There's a lot going on to set up a new widget in our current flow because we just have so many things to take note of. So it feels good to get that out of the way. If this video helped you set up your in-game store or in-game shop, whatever you decide to call it, please subscribe. It does more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do, and I just really appreciate it. Thank you again to my YouTube membership and Patreon members and supporters. I really am grateful for everything you guys have done. Thank you so much for all the kind support. If you guys ran into any trouble while watching this episode or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. I'd be happy to help you out, and it's completely free. Like I said, guys, that's all I got, so thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.